Hi everybody, the video today is all about off-leash parks. We'll be discussing why they're good for your dog and more importantly, why they're not good for your dog. Let's get into it. Thank you for coming back to the YouTube channel. I really appreciate your support. I'm Claude Bertoni. The video today is all about off-leash dog parks and, as I mentioned in the intro, why they can be good and why they can be detrimental to your dog. I did a video about a year ago explaining or putting down some thoughts about why dog trainers consider off-leash parks to be problematic, and it seems to have raised just as many questions as it did in terms of providing answers to people. So I thought I'd produce another video and try and explain it in a little bit more detail, or maybe give you a slightly different point of view as to why off-leash dog parks do have a place, but we need to be mindful of how we approach them and what we need to do to actually make sure that our dogs get the maximum benefit out of it. The first thing that we need to look at when discussing off-leash parks is the mindset behind taking your dog to it. So there's a couple of different alternatives. If you take your dog to an off-leash dog park or an off-leash park and there's no other dogs around and you want to give your dog a bit of a run or throw a tennis ball to get some exercise happening, there's an inherent benefit of that. Dogs need to run, they need to stretch their legs, but it can't be the main way that we actually stimulate our dogs or exercise our dogs. So yes, that's an important component. But if we take our dogs to an off-leash park and we want the dogs to be in and around lots of other dogs in terms of just getting them exposed and, for want of a better word, socialize them, we are actually setting the dogs up to fail, because we've got the mindset that we just want the dogs to get along and play, but dogs don't see that environment the same way. So dogs effectively are spontaneous, emotional, impulsive dogs or animals, and what they would do in any scenario that you put them into, if they haven't been trained to adjust their behavior in a way that makes us happy, they'll be doing certain behavioral mannerisms to relate to or adjust to the situation as they see fit. So if we put them in an off-leash environment and there's little dogs that they like to chase, they'll invariably want to chase them. Now, they can have all the best intentions and they can run around and have fun, but as soon as the dog being chased doesn't enjoy it, there's a potential conflict situation. The whole predatory chase me, chase you mentality has an element in play, but there's a lot of instinctive behavior that goes back to it, and predatory behavior uncontrolled can create all sorts of problems for the dogs in that particular environment, and it's a potential source of a problem for dog owners, because once the bigger dog catches a smaller dog, what does it do? Does it pick it up? Does it run around? Does it injure it? And even just picking it up, it could effectively hurt it. So there's a bit of a problem that we need to associate with that kind of behavior. Another component that is very evident in an off-leash park environment, a lot of dogs are not really that comfortable in that situation. They might be fine with dogs that they're familiar with, but as soon as the dynamic changes by having dogs of different personality, or for want of a better expression, different energy levels turns up, some dogs find it a little bit intimidating, and they're more likely to show reactive behaviors that are based on lack of confidence, and that can produce a whole lot of behaviors in another dog. So an encounter which starts off with a dog that might be a little bit insecure, with a dog that might be a little bit boisterous and dominant, can potentially turn into a situation of conflict, and that's not a safe environment for that dog either. So effectively, it could be another situation where we are potentially putting the dog into a situation of high stress and then expecting it to react in a way that makes us happy, when all it wants to do is to remove the pressure of being intimidated by the other dog. So again, that's another potential for a dog fight or a situation of conflict, which is not really that comfortable for a dog either. In my last video, I mentioned that a lot of times dogs will show instinctive behaviors that are quite pronounced, and many of the problems that I get asked to resolve by people that like to attend off-leash parks is a common thing is my dog runs up and steals other dogs' balls, or it steals other dogs' food from their owners, and that can be a potential problem. So this comes down to resources, and all dogs see everything in life as a whole series of resources. Some I want to share, some I don't want to share, some I value more than others. And your dog, if it's ball obsessed, all it does, it's tunnel vision for that ball, and it goes and tries to take it. Now the other dog might see their ball as something incredibly valuable, and it may not want to share it. So that again is another situation where we're having a potential fight on our hands, which is not a good scenario, because all of a sudden all the best intentions can potentially lead to another conflict situation. So I've given you 3 very different scenarios which happen quite often in off-leash parks. We have a dog that's intimidated by being around other dogs and it's not really that comfortable. We've got a predatory situation where dogs like to chase each other. And we've got another situation where we've got dogs that are going around stealing balls and stealing food from other dogs. All of those 3 can potentially lead to a conflict scenario. And that is not a good situation. So if we take this a little bit further, we're putting dogs effectively in a situation where they can adjust to pressure in a way that they see fit. So if they feel excited, they'll go towards something. If they want to chase it, they'll chase it. And if they want to run away from it, they'll actually move the pressure away by removing themselves from that situation. And that's all well and good in that off-leash park scenario. But when the pup or the dog then gets on lead and it's walking down the street, and it feels intimidated, excited, or frustrated by a dog or something in the street, all of a sudden, because it's now on lead, it hasn't got the ability to adjust to the pressure by moving to it or moving away from it. And that creates what we call on-leash reactivity. And on-leash reactivity is a bit of a problem because most of us will be walking our dogs to and from the dog park or just around the streets in general. And if the majority of the time your dog is reactive on leash, it's a problem because then we put the dog off lead and it's fine and it just exacerbates the problem. So it's a vicious cycle that produces more and more problems as the dog spends more time in an off-leash environment. And that again is teaching the dog all the wrong ways to resolve conflict and resolve problems and resolve arousal at the expense of the comfort and the mental well-being of the dog. Another point that is not really often considered is just that off-leash parks in a lot of situations end up being a babysitter for dogs, similarly to how televisions in some situations end up being a babysitter for our children. We often take our dogs to an off-leash park and they run around and all the adults and humans are just standing around talking to each other and the dogs are running amok in the background. And if that's the way people like to address off-leash parks, then again, we're missing valuable interaction, valuable mental stimulation and valuable training opportunities to actually be with our dogs and training them accordingly. One of the things that I find incredibly frightening about an off-leash park is there's no vetting of whether dogs have got behavioural issues or whether they're trained or whether they're balanced or just okay to be around other dogs in general. And we're relying on the honesty of people attending the off-leash parks to tell you that their dogs are fine. The amount of times that I've seen incidents in off-leash parks where people knowingly have dogs that have got reactivity issues or are aggressive or are not comfortable around other dogs and show aggression as a result, and they take them to off-leash parks and it produces all sorts of mayhem in the other dogs around them. And what a lot of people don't realize is that you are legally responsible for your dog in that situation and your dog needs to be under effective control, which basically means you need to be able to call it back to you under distraction and get it to stop doing the behavior that it's actually doing at the time. So if you cast your mind back to the last time you were at an off-leash park, how many dogs are actually capable of doing that? And the problem with having incidents at an off-leash park, if your dog bites a dog, that's one thing. If it bites a person, that's a whole other discussion and that's a potential liability for a criminal prosecution. I can say this because I do a lot of expert witness stuff. And the vast majority of people that I'm assisting in a legal situation stem from off-lead interaction, whether their dog has been bitten or whether their dog has instigated the behavior. And that's a problem because we don't know what we don't know. And putting your dogs in situations that are a little bit uncertain is a problem. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. So if we look at off-leash parks as the complete opposite of socialization, we need to then look at, well, what do we do with the dog? How do we socialize it? And what do we do to get it to be good around other dogs? And being a dog trainer that's been training for about 25 years, doing one-on-one consultation and running many group obedience training centers, my first advice to clients is find a good obedience dog club that's got a proven obedience and socialization program and join up as a client. What happens is it becomes a social interaction for the humans, but in that context, the dogs are also getting dog-to-dog stimulation from training exercises, playing exercises, agility, all sorts of different manifestations of training and interaction that produce positive associations with lots of different people and lots of different dogs in a really considered, structured environment. And that is by far the best way to socialize your dog, and it can be done on a weekly basis. A lot of dog training centers do run weekly, and it's a good source of stimulation for your dog. Again, thank you for making it through to the end of the video. The moral of the story is do attend off-leash parks if you choose to, but be mindful that we are potentially creating a lot of problems downstream for our dog. If you do attend them, at least make sure that we can interrupt the behaviours that we don't like in our dogs and have the confidence to tell people to bring their dogs into line if they're doing something unpleasant or unsatisfactory to your dog. But if we're serious about good socialization, then look at the options of joining a really good obedience training centre near you, one that's got a proven socialization, confidence development and obedience program, and that way you'll know that your dog gets the benefit of dog-to-dog and dog-to-human interaction, but actually learning how to interact within selected constraints and with a definite end in mind. I'll put a link in the description below to one of the videos that I've done recently on how to pick a good dog obedience club, and for those of you that are based in Melbourne, Victoria, it'll give you the highlights of all the dog training centres that I rate as good dog training centres, so then you know what to look for and what to ask. Thanks again.